there is something missing from our world. Wait, scratch that. There's like a lot of things missing from our world. Jobs, cinema, social events. We really do live in the worst timeline. Oh, also, the amazing animals that time has left behind. But what if we could bring all that back? What if extinction didn't have to be forever? So, we're going back in time, on a mission, plunging into the past, to rescue all of that from the brink of extinction. The plan is to bring them back to this dull present and give us a second chance. Welcome to the ultimate sanctuary. Welcome to 2020. Okay, you gotta be kidding me with this script. If you have a freaking time machine, we can just go to the future where conditions should be better. I tried that. It's not what's gonna happen. Oh, okay. I guess the past is our only salvation. Hey, hello. So, you may be aware that the present isn't really an appealing moment. I mean, it has its perks, but it also has its flaws. In a biodiversity perspective, the moment we live in is much less biodiverse than many moments in the distant past, caused in a large part by us, humans. All of the amazing creatures that were met with extinction may never be seen again. Or can they? That's what we are trying to find out. We are going to take a look at the possibility of bringing back extinct animals from the past to present. Is it possible? Can we make our own prehistoric park in real life? Okay, look, this is not a new idea. There is a lot of media that attempt to explore this concept. A hypothetical theme park, zoo, or wildlife sanctuary aiming to harbor extinct prehistoric creatures from an extinction believed to be unfair and whose survival should be under our own judgment rather than nature's. I am of course thinking on Jurassic Park. The first movie, as well as the less successful sequels, explored the effects of bringing back extinct dinosaurs and other Mesozoic creatures from the past to the present. Riding a similar wave, the docufiction series Prehistoric Park explores the construction of a wildlife sanctuary filled with prehistoric creatures from all eras. These have different aims. Jurassic Park goes very much in accordance with its cinematic nature. It's aimed to entertain the public and gain money from people who just want to see dinosaurs. They do not care if the dinosaurs are accurate or behave properly, they just care about the money they will get from awesome bro aficionados. Prehistoric Park goes more in accordance with a documentary-like perspective. The goal is to harbor the prehistoric animals into the park to save them from the extinction, because they deserve a second chance at survival. So there are different focus in the two pieces of media. Focus on the public and clients, or focus on the animals themselves. I believe the latter is the most coherent if you want to bring back extinct animals in the first place. But how exactly does one do that? Going back to the two pieces of media we mentioned before, Jurassic Park and Prehistoric Park. They bring back animals from the past in two distinct ways. While prehistoric animals in the Prehistoric Park series are more scientifically accurate than Jurassic Park's, the method to rescue the animals is notoriously more unrealistic in Prehistoric Park. They use a time portal to bring back the animals directly from the past. Conceptually, that would be an ideal way, but we haven't proved any possibility for us humans to be able to time travel to the past. Yet. So we should be ruling out that hypothesis. The concept behind Jurassic Park's de-extinction is much more doable in real life, as they extract DNA from animals long dead and use them to bring back to life. Of course there are a lot of problems here, but we are going to take a look at the various options we have to bring back extinct animals back to life, and we will see how some of these are more genuine in doing that task than others. So let's just grab the Jurassic Park technique, which is find good remains of dead extinct animals and you analyze it and see a cell with DNA in it, and you'll be like, whoa, we can now bring an animal back to life with DNA magic. But hold on your horses, or should I say, hold on to your butts. It's just not that easy. For starters, DNA is a super fragile thing. Even our DNA doesn't last our entire lifespans. It is continuously regenerated because DNA on its own disintegrates after a while. Even water can do that. Unless specific conditions exist for its preservation, viable DNA samples can very well disappear in hundreds of years in the remains of a certain extinct animal. Though not all is lost, because we want to look at the freaks of DNA preservation that preserve in exceptional conditions much earlier than normal. According to a study, DNA in the best conditions can be preserved with a maximum lifespan of 6.8 million years. This would allow available DNA to be hypothetically be preserved from creatures dating back to the late Miocene, which is mind-blowing. However, the same study warned the DNA would start to be unreadable after 1.5 million years at max, which would be problematic to bring back creatures from before the Pleistocene. In June 2013, DNA has been sequenced from a 600,000-year-old horse from Yukon. This is pretty interesting, especially taking into account native North American horses have been driven by extinction, presumably by humans, which would make it the oldest DNA sample from an extinct animal. Later in 2016, researchers measured chloroplast DNA in marine sediment cores and found diatom DNA dating back to 1.4 million years ago. For context, diatoms are microscopic photosynthetic organisms that are an important composition of the ocean's phytoplankton. The research is pretty significant, as the half-life of this diatom DNA is much longer than the ones calculated for many animals, for instance. An even more recent discovery seems to suggest, however, that DNA has survived much earlier time spans, as evidenced by the disputed discovery of DNA in a Hypacrosaurus. Yup, you heard it right, DNA from a Mesozoic dinosaur. This discovery is of course being taken with caution, as this might very well be some form of contamination, for example, DNA coming from external sources, and not from the dinosaur itself. However, it shouldn't be so surprising to see a DNA preserved with this age in dinosaurs, as tissue with cells and even proteins being preserved in Cretaceous dinosaurs have been found. However, if that's actually non-avian dinosaur DNA right there, it likely is too fragmentary to allow any form of sequencing or reading, which is sad, as an Hypacrosaurus would be a perfect addition for an hypothetical prehistoric park. So, knowing that DNA can be preserved and sequenced if at a maximum age of 1.5 million years, this could mean we could bring back so many extinct creatures back from extinction, right? Terror birds, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, moas, deer-like giraffe relatives, terrestrial crocodilians, calicoteers. Okay, hold on to your butt one more time. DNA can be preserved as far as 1.5 million years to the point of readability, but in most cases that's just not what happens. We have found DNA from several extinct creatures, but not at a crazy level. We have DNA from ancient humans, mammoths, extinct bison, cave lions, extinct bears, extinct horses, saber-toothed cats, moas, elephant birds, etc. But there are so many amazing creatures that we lack the DNA from, and despite having lived in a proper moment in time for resurrection, we may never find DNA from them in proper conditions. But if we have DNA from all of these animals, why didn't we resurrect at least one of them? Is this technology for that task too advanced? Well, yes and no. As crazy as it seems to bring back an extinct animal back from the world of the living, it has, surprisingly, been done before. The Pyrenean ibex was an extinct subspecies of the modern Iberian ibex. It went extinct in January 2000 as the last member of the subspecies, a female named Celia, was killed by a fallen tree, a crude and cold way to call the end of an entire group of genetically distinct animals. Obviously, the extinction of these mountain goats was likely a mix between competition with other herbivorous animals, like domesticated ones, including domestic goats, and maybe even disease and poaching playing an effect on their demise. Eventually, however, the extinction of the animal was reverted through the magic of cloning. Researchers took adult somatic cells from a Pyrenean ibex tissue and fused them with oocytes from goats that had their nuclei removed. This was made to allow the oocyte to generate a pure Pyrenean ibex, as the DNA included in the oocyte is 100% Pyrenean ibex in a cell of a domestic goat, however. The viable embryo that was produced was transferred to a domestic goat's uterus, which would work as a surrogate mother for the extinct animal. Just to take into account, cloning goes wrong a lot of times. Of the 285 embryos produced, only 2 survived the initial 2 months of gestation. However, on July 30, 2003, the last Pyrenean ibex is born, the only clone to survive the gestation. The first extinct species to be genuinely resurrected, and then the clone died. Just minutes after birth due to physical defects in the lungs, this was the only animal to have went extinct twice, and neither was in a glorious manner. So you see, we have the technology, but it kinda is super hard to do it. We may find ways to go around that problem, but for now cloning is complicated. I mean, cloning for animals, that is. mammals in particular are very challenging to clone, because a huge number of embryos die before they gestate and are born alive. The rate of success is just stupendously low, but nothing is lost, as long as we keep trying. Attempts at cloning back extinct animals is a strategy that scientists are still confident, and in fact may be one of the only ways to bring back some extinct animals. You would be surprised how hard that is though, as even very recently extinct animals lack proper intact DNA. The passenger pigeon, for example, was a species of North American pigeon that was likely one of the wild bird species with the biggest number of individuals in the entire planet. It was surprising how they eventually went extinct by mankind just a little over 100 years ago. Yet specimens from museums and skins known from this bird still exists, but attempts have been failed to retrieve enough DNA for this cloning method, because it is so degraded. Just imagining that DNA can degrade to the point of unreadability in just a century implies how hard it is to replicate extinct animals. The thylacine, a carnivorous marsupial from Tasmania, went extinct in less than 85 years, and yet we only have reconstructed its genome by using the genome editing method, using the genes of the living Tasmanian devil, a relative of the thylacine, as a reference for the assembly of the full nuclear genome. Either way, it is a true testament for the difficulties of cloning using original complete DNA from a long-deceased animal. What was made with the thylacine genome has fortunately been done for a few other unrelated extinct species, and surprisingly, some are titanically more ancient, the woolly mammoth. We have reconstructed the genome of the woolly mammoth, and there have been many efforts to try and bring this creature back to life. One form of mammoth revival is using a simple cloning process. Ideally, if we add sperm and a oocyte from a mammoth, we could theoretically inseminate a mammoth cell and create a pure mammoth embryo. Unfortunately, we lack that. Another method is through artificially inseminating an Asian elephant egg cell with preserved mammoth sperm cells. Asian elephants are great candidates as they are the closest living relatives to mammoths. The offspring would result in an Asian elephant mammoth hybrid, and over the course of generations, crossbreeding with more hybrids would, as time passes, contribute for the creation of a pure mammoth with pure mammoth DNA. Unfortunately, it is unlikely that mammoth sperm cells would last that long and still remain active, but as we have the full genome of the woolly mammoth, we may have a chance of using another technique of bringing back extinct animals from the dead, which is by using genome editing. By using genome editing, we may use cells from a closely related species to the extinct ones and edit the genome, by basing ourselves in the reconstructed genome of the extinct animal. This may be a probable salvation for animals like mammoths or the thylacine, for instance. This is still a complicated process, as we don't know everything about DNA yet, and it may be more complicated than it may sound, but ideally that is a viable way to bring back an extinct animal, like the mammoth, back to the present. One important issue that this brings is genetic diversity, because it's all great that we have reconstructed a mammoth, a first mammoth, but now, is it going to reproduce and allow its species to continue in the future? Because if you make a clone of the same mammoth, you would essentially be forcing the mammoth to have sex with itself, even if we just switch the sex of the clone. This is problematic in terms of genetic diversity, which is key to allow for species to evolve, adapt, and proliferate in an environment. Otherwise, every single member of the species will be forced to live with a defect that only one individual has. Perhaps through gene editing we could potentially help go around some of the problems that this causes, but yet again it may not be as easy as it sounds. There are a few other techniques to bring back extinct animals from the dead, but these may seem to not go in accordance to true resurrection of an extinct animal, and this is selective breeding. So many extinct animals are known to have extremely close relatives still alive today. These may be beneficial for ones that want to selectively breed that particular species and reveal traits that are more resembling of that extinct species, eventually recreating an extinct species or subspecies from a living one. This is being made with aurochs, quaggas, and the passenger pigeons. Let's give some context to these animals in question. Aurochs, for instance, are believed to be symbolic ancestors of the modern domestic cows. Technically, cows are living domesticated aurochs, same way how dogs are technically domesticated wolves. However, it is pretty clear that wild wolf populations are very genetically distinct from the dog. cows and the zebus are alive today and are basically domesticated surviving remnants of the wild aurochs, and there were wild subspecies of aurochs around Afro-Eurasia until they went extinct. The last one died in the 17th century, almost 400 years ago. The goal is to bring it back. The strategy that people are using is use selective breeding, using cows that share very specific traits to the ancestral aurochs, and hopefully these can be released to the wild and fill the ecological niche of the auroch, potentially contributing to the ecological health of the environment that these animals once lived. Quaggas are an extinct subspecies of the plain zebra that lived in southern Africa. It was peculiar due to having a brownish stripeless body in the rear, but having its frontal part striped like a normal zebra. The zebra went extinct almost 140 years ago, but efforts have been made to selectively breed modern plain zebras to slowly resemble the extinct quaggas. The passenger pigeon that we have spoke about before was a peculiar North American bird that was one of the most numerous birds in the entire world before it went extinct. It could reach 100 km per hour during flight. Magnificent bird that went extinct by intense poaching, habitat degradation, etc. It's amazing how humans can disrupt and completely corrupt an entire numerous species in so little time. Fortunately, efforts are being made to recreate this species of bird from its closest living relative, the band-tailed pigeon, to slowly resemble the extinct species in appearance. All of these efforts may sound like cheating, as you are not exactly recreating the extinct species as it was, but there is an inherent advantage in bringing back extinct animals to the present, especially recently extinct ones, as they served an important ecological role that is sadly absent nowadays, and if restored may prove beneficial for the biodiversity of a certain habitat. Although mammoths may have problems in being brought back through this technique, also are being seen as beneficial ecological health contributors. Back in the times when mammoths were common, there was an habitat called the mammoth steppe, which is now a very rare one. This was a place where large plains covered large portions of the northern hemisphere, and that's where mammoths and other prehistoric herbivorous animals grazed in peace, clearing the way for the growth of coniferous forests. Now, with the extinction of these snow-dwelling behemoths, the plains have now largely vanished, and it's mostly covered in dense woods where only forest-dwelling animals inhabit. So there is importance to why we want to bring back extinct animals back to the present, especially the ones whose extinction was something we did, not nature. Jurassic Park is a movie that actually deals with this issue, as the animals that they are trying to bring back went extinct for a reason, otherwise we humans would never have been here in the first place. And I get it, it would be awesome to bring back non-avian dinosaurs to the present, but it's not a question of if we could, it's a question of if we should. And that's particularly important, and that is why efforts are being made to bring back mammoths and aurochs rather than a Tyrannosaurus rex, so to be fair we don't really have much of a choice. However, bringing back extinct animals may be a hard task. What if we can't bring all of those extinct animals back? There have been proposals to do something else. Rewilding areas with modern animals to simulate an extinct environment and hopefully bring back a piece of the past with tools that we haven't lost yet. This is a type of rewilding that many are coining the term Pleistocene rewilding. Pleistocene rewilding is a name referencing the Pleistocene geological epoch, which ended 11,700 years ago, at the end of the last ice age that was subsequently followed by extinctions of several extraordinary species caused by ancient humans. The idea is to bring back these environments back to the present and restore the ecological equilibrium that existed back then before we crashed the party. And this would have been done through the introduction of modern species to fill the role of extinct animals. This would have been done at a global scale, hopefully. For instance, take into account the continent of North America, a continent that was very different fauna-wise some 15,000 years ago. For example, the Bolson tortoise is a critically endangered modern tortoise now only found in a small locality in north-central Mexico. It was much more widespread in the past, and if we introduce these turtles across North America, it could contribute to recreate the soil humidity of the Pleistocene and promote the formation of grasslands and shrublands which would be perfect to harbor other animals. Pronghorns and prairie bisons should be reintroduced to areas where they have been extirpated to eventually reconstruct this lost world. Bighorn sheep and mountain goats would go to mountainous regions where they are now absent, and deer diversity would be promoted for the forest areas. Peccaries were once widespread across North America, and they would occupy a similar role to pigs in Afro-Eurasia, filling an important role in the ecosystem. Horses, onagers, kiangs, and asses could be rewilded to recover the ancient equine diversity to North America. Predators like the American lion were once present before they went extinct, so introducing modern lions to the North American plains would be great to restore some of that native predatory roles, alongside the already common wolves, which would also play an important role. Camels, guanacos, and vicuñas would replace the extinct North American camelids. Cougars would be hunting these as a result. Tapirs once existed in North America, but most modern species are tropical dwellers. The mountain tapir may be a valuable exception, living in areas close to the waters and in humid, more temperate forests, as they are preyed by bears and introduced jaguars. Despite mammoths and mastodons existing in the past, it would be very hard to reconstruct their ecological niche, especially in the extremely cold areas with modern elephants. We kinda will have to live with that. Asian and maybe even African elephants can be introduced in less cold regions of the North American continent, and we know from fossil records that Asian elephants did live in temperate regions, and they may survive in Central North America nowadays. Cheetahs could be introduced to replace the extinct American cheetah. Europe also suffered a lot from human impact, and rewilding a lot of areas has been proposed and is ongoing in some form. Some animals have already been introduced in areas where they have went extinct, whether intentionally or not, such as fallow deer, mouflons, musk oxen, European and even American bison, northern bald ibis, water buffaloes and ostriches. Expanding the range of extant European species is essential to restore some of that ancient biodiversity. Animals like the ibexes, chamois, moose, wolves, lynxes, bears, European minks, monk seals, beavers, ospreys, eagles, and vultures. Horses and cows, which are domestic animals, could be released to the wild to fill the role of their extinct wild relatives. Animals that are alive today once existed in Europe, or at least their relatives were, and could be reintroduced again for the sake of remaking said ancient biodiversity, including Asian black bears, Asian elephants, lions, dholes, dromedary camels, hippos, onagers, leopards, saiga antelopes, hyenas, and even rhinos. Siberia is a cold place, and it is hard to bring back animals such as modern elephants to replace the mammoths, but we have at least a chance of restoring other lost fauna. Yaks, musk ox, bison and horses have already been introduced, and camels, saiga antelopes, roe deer, Siberian tiger and snow sheep may follow. Other regions of Asia could be reintroduced with animals that are already rare or absent, such as tigers, sea lions, wolves, tapirs, ostriches and dholes, in regions like Iran, the Koreas, Japan, southern China, etc. Giant tortoises, like the extant Aldabra giant tortoise, have been proposed to be introduced in regions that once had extinct giant tortoises, like in Madagascar. In Hawaii, there was the moanalo, a large flightless herbivorous duck that went extinct, and it has been proposed that giant tortoises could fill the role left by them, even though they are not close relatives, promoting the control of invasive plants in the islands. Australia was one of the continents that was most affected by humans, with several extraordinary species having went extinct. Some have found refuge in Tasmania, such as the thylacine and the Tasmanian devil, the former being extinct and the latter being in decline. Recently, Tasmanian devils have been reintroduced to New South Wales, and that is a big step in restoring the ancient faunal assemblage of the continental portion of the country. Koalas, wombats, kangaroos, cassowaries and pinnipeds would have benefited the diversity of this portion of the globe if their ranges are expanded. Long-beaked echidnas, Komodo dragons and some New Zealand birds with extinct Australian relatives could be reintroduced to replace the animals that were once flourishing in this isolated continent. The British Isles have drastically been drained from their biodiversity of yore. Introducing other herbivorous animals like bison, reindeer and elk would be beneficial for such a desired restoration. And many more regions of the globe could also receive this treatment. And overall the goal is to not just make a park to appeal people and for them to visit in a certain expensive summer vacation. The goal is for us to no longer see these extinct environments as something from the past. We are now looking at them as something reachable and something that we can live on and appreciate with our own eyes, and bring back a part of the world that we have left behind. We are no longer aiming at making a prehistoric park, we are aiming to make a prehistoric world. And this is by no means a step back, but a big step forward. Though making a step back is also a good thing. Gary is trying his best at editing the genome of an Ipacarosaurus using chicken DNA. So I'm gonna step back and peace out. Bye, see you next. I swear I'm getting closer. I know it, I can feel it.